She wanted to be more confident, stronger, more in control of her own life. She just didn't expect her biggest challenge to be a man who takes her down with flawless technique, then offers his hand like he's saying, "You quitting, or are you trying again?" And the problem is she can't decide what annoys her more, his attitude, his size, or the fact that she loves being challenged by him. The Self-Defense Academy smelled of rubber mats, sweat, and honest effort. Punching bags hung from the ceiling like silent sentinels, and motivational posters lined the walls with phrases that probably inspired someone, somewhere, at some point in history. Hayley Winslow stood near the entrance, tugging at her brand-new athletic wear, tags removed approximately 7 minutes ago, and wondering what temporary insanity had possessed her to sign up for this class. She was a graphic designer, for heaven's sake. The most dangerous thing she handled on a daily basis was a particularly aggressive paper cut. But she was tired of feeling small, tired of crossing the street when she walked alone at night, tired of being the delicate one, the fragile one, the one people instinctively wanted to protect. Today she would prove that delicate women could be strong too. She adjusted her ponytail for the 14th time and surveyed the room. The class was a mixed group. A few women her age, some older men clearly reliving their youth, and a handful of people who looked like they actually knew what they were doing. The instructor, a cheerful man in his 50s with a whistle around his neck, clapped his hands together. "All right, everyone, pair up for our first exercise." Hayley's eyes darted around desperately. There was a woman about her size near the water fountain. Perfect. She took one step in that direction. "You?" The voice came from behind her, deep, authoritative, with an undertone of amusement that made her spine stiffen. She turned around and had to tilt her head back, and back some more. The man standing before her was a colossus, nearly 6'5", with shoulders broad enough to block out the fluorescent lights, muscles straining against a black t-shirt that had clearly done nothing wrong to deserve such punishment. His jaw looked like it had been carved by an artist with anger issues, and his eyes, dark, intelligent, assessing, seemed to catalogue everything about her in a single glance. He extended a hand the size of a dinner plate. "Ready? If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion." Hayley's mouth went dry. The universe had a sick sense of humor. She lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of false bravery she possessed. "Sure, I can handle you." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or entertainment. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. He found her absolutely adorable, she realized, with a mix of indignation and something else she refused to name. "Damien Gallagher," he said, still holding her hand. "Hayley Winslow." She tried to match his firm grip. Her fingers disappeared inside his palm. The instructor began demonstrating a basic defensive move, something about leverage and center of gravity that Hayley only half heard because she was too busy calculating exactly how many of her it would take to equal one of him. At least 2, possibly 3. "Your turn," Damien said, positioning himself in front of her. "Try to push me back." She planted her feet, bent her knees the way the instructor had shown, and pushed with everything she had. He didn't move, not an inch. He might as well have been a mountain. "Interesting technique," he observed mildly. "I'm warming up," she said through gritted teeth. "Of course." They switched to the actual defensive maneuver. Hayley was supposed to redirect his attack, use his momentum against him, textbook stuff that looked effortless when demonstrated. She lunged, he moved, and suddenly she was flat on her back on the mat, staring at the ceiling, all the air knocked out of her lungs. He'd taken her down with calculated precision, firm enough to be real, gentle enough not to hurt, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. His face appeared above her, a crease of genuine concern between his brows. "Are you all right?" Hayley lay there for 2 full seconds, processing the fact that she had just been defeated by a man who probably bench-pressed cars for fun. Then she huffed, utterly indignant. "I let you win." The laugh that escaped him was deep, genuine, and so unexpected that several heads turned in their direction. It transformed his severe features into something almost boyish, and Hayley felt her traitorous heart skip a beat. He offered his hand, that enormous, capable hand, and pulled her up effortlessly. "Of course you did," he said, still smiling. The instructor had to call for silence twice, because apparently everyone in the room had decided their interaction was more interesting than actual learning. Haley's cheeks burned. For the rest of the class, she threw herself into every exercise with stubborn determination. He matched her energy, never mocking, never condescending, but always with that infuriating hint of amusement lurking in his eyes. When the session finally ended, Haley grabbed her water bottle and headed for her bag, desperate to escape before she did something embarrassing, like challenge him to a rematch or stare at his forearms again. She was stuffing her towel into her gym bag when a shadow fell over her. Coffee. She looked up. Damien stood there, slightly sweaty, entirely too handsome, holding his own gym bag like it weighed nothing. To compensate for me winning, he added, and the quotation marks were audible. Haley should have said no. She had work to do, emails to answer, a perfectly good evening of avoiding human interaction planned. Fine, she heard herself say, but you're paying. His smile widened. I wouldn't have it any other way. The coffee shop was one of those cozy neighborhood places with mismatched furniture, exposed brick walls, and baristas who looked like they had opinions about your latte art. Haley had walked past it dozens of times but never gone in. Now she sat across from a man who could probably crush the tiny wooden table between them with one hand, watching him attempt to fold himself into a chair clearly designed for normal-sized humans. Comfortable? She asked sweetly. Damien shifted, his knees bumping the table. The salt shaker trembled. Perfectly. A waitress appeared, eyeing Damien with the kind of appreciation Haley suspected he received everywhere he went. She ordered a cappuccino. He ordered black coffee and somehow made it sound sophisticated. So, Haley said once they were alone, do you always prey on unsuspecting beginners at self-defense class? Only the ones who claim they let me win. I stand by my statement. You were lying on the floor when you made it. She narrowed her eyes. He smiled, that infuriating half-smile that suggested he knew exactly how much he was getting under her skin. Their drinks arrived, and somehow the conversation shifted from combat to everything else. Movies. They both had an inexplicable fondness for 80s action films and could quote entire scenes from memory. Humor, equally dry, equally sarcastic, equally inappropriate at family dinners. Books, and more specifically, people who borrowed books and never returned them. Criminal behavior, Damien declared with absolute seriousness. Should be prosecuted, Haley agreed. I had a first edition Hemingway disappear into the void because of a college roommate. I lost an entire Jane Austen collection to a former friend, emphasis on former. They stared at each other with the solemn understanding of people who had suffered the same tragedy. The cappuccino was excellent. The company was better. Haley found herself leaning forward, laughing at things that weren't even that funny, watching the way his eyes crinkled when he was amused. So what do you do? She asked. When you're not terrifying beginners at the gym? Damien took a sip of his coffee, casual as anything. I run a hotel company. Oh, nice. Which hotel? Several, actually, luxury properties, around the world. Haley blinked. Around the world. Currently 23 locations, 25 by next year if the expansion goes well. She choked on her cappuccino. Foam went up her nose. Her eyes watered. She coughed with the elegance of a startled cat, while Damien watched, somewhere between concerned and entertained. 23 hotels, she managed, once she could breathe again. 23, he confirmed. Are you all right? Fine. Completely fine. She wiped foam from her chin with a napkin. You said that very casually. Like you were mentioning you own a goldfish. I don't own a goldfish. That's not the point. He leaned back, and there was something almost vulnerable in the way he shrugged. It's just work. Doesn't define me. Haley studied him. He didn't wear a watch that cost more than her apartment. His clothes were quality but understated. Nothing about him screamed wealth, except perhaps the quiet confidence of someone who had never worried about paying a bill in his life. Is that why you take self-defense classes? She asked. Rich man learning to protect himself from kidnappers? Damien's expression shifted, still amused, but with an undercurrent of something more serious. I believe every man worth anything should know how to fight, how to protect what matters to him. The conviction in his voice made something strange happen in Haley's chest, a flutter, a warmth. She blamed the cappuccino. "That's surprisingly old-fashioned," she said. "I'm a surprisingly old-fashioned man. You're also surprisingly humble about owning 23 luxury hotels. 23 and a half. There's a situation in Monaco." She laughed, a real laugh, unexpected and bright, and his eyes softened in a way that made her stomach flip. They talked until the coffee grew cold and the waitress started giving them pointed looks. About her work as a graphic designer, about his travels, about the peculiar loneliness that came from being surrounded by people who wanted something from you. "Is that why you picked me as your partner?" Haley asked suddenly. "Because I didn't know who you were." Damien tilted his head, considering. "I picked you because you walked into that gym looking like you were about to fight a dragon, wearing athletic clothes with the tags barely removed, and I thought, that woman is either very brave or very foolish. And which am I?" "Both," he said. "It's refreshing." Outside, the sky had turned orange and pink with approaching sunset. Haley realized with a start that hours had passed. "I should go," she said, not moving. "Same time next week? At the gym? Are you going to knock me down again?" "Almost certainly." "Then I'll be there." She gathered her bag, then paused. "And Damien, I really did let you win. I was testing your reflexes." His laugh followed her out the door, warm and genuine, settling somewhere in her chest like a secret she wasn't ready to examine. She walked home smiling and told herself it was just the coffee. The following week, Haley arrived at the gym at 6 in the morning, determined to get some practice in before anyone else showed up, particularly before a certain giant with an infuriating smile showed up. She was stretching by the punching bags when the door opened. Damien walked in, gym bag over his shoulder, looking unfairly awake for this ungodly hour. "Early bird," he observed. "I could say the same about you. I always train at this time." "So do I," she lied. She had never voluntarily woken before 7 in her entire adult life. His mouth twitched. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew. Neither of them acknowledged it. They fell into an unspoken routine. He positioned himself at the weight rack near her usual spot. She pretended not to notice. He pretended not to watch her attempt bicep curls with weights that were probably too heavy. "Your form is off," he said after her third set. "My form is fine. You're going to hurt your shoulder. I know what I'm doing." He raised an eyebrow, crossed his arms, and waited. Haley lasted approximately 45 seconds before her shoulder twinged painfully. She lowered the weights with as much dignity as she could muster. Damien appeared beside her, his large hands adjusting her grip, repositioning her elbows, pressing gently on her shoulders to correct her posture. His touch was clinical, professional. It lasted half a second longer than necessary. "Better," he murmured, stepping back. Haley's skin tingled where he'd touched her. She blamed it on the early hour. The self-defense class started, and once again they paired up, this time without the instructor's intervention. It just happened as natural as breathing. She still couldn't take him down, but she was improving. He told her so, and the praise made her beam like she'd won an Olympic medal. After class, a woman from their group approached them by the water fountain. Margaret, mid-60s, silver hair, zero filter. "You two make such a lovely couple," she declared. "How long have you been together?" Haley opened her mouth to correct her, but Damien spoke first. "Thank you, Margaret, that's very kind." Not a denial, not a confirmation, just a smooth deflection that left the question entirely unanswered. Margaret nodded approvingly and walked away. Haley stared at Damien. "You didn't correct her." "Neither did you." "I was going to." "Were you?" His eyes sparkled with that maddening amusement. She had no response, mostly because she wasn't entirely sure she would have corrected Margaret, and that realization was deeply inconvenient. The coincidences continued. He always arrived at the exact time she did, no matter how she varied her schedule. He always ended up near her during warm-ups. He always had a reason to adjust her form, her stance during squats, her grip during deadlifts, the angle of her punches. His hands were always warm, always careful, always lingering just a moment too long. Other gym members started to notice. The receptionist smiled knowingly whenever they walked in together. The personal trainers gave Damien approving nods. Two older gentlemen started a betting pool on when they would make it official. Damien never denied anything. When asked directly, he would change the subject with practiced ease, but the message was clear to everyone watching. She was off limits. Haley wasn't sure how she felt about that. Flattered, confused, terrified, all of the above. One evening after a particularly grueling session, Damien mentioned he'd left his water bottle at his apartment. "I thought you had a squeeze bottle," Haley said. "This is a different one, special. I need it for training. You have a special water bottle. Hydration is important." She laughed. "Fine. I live 10 minutes from here. You can borrow one of mine." It was an innocent offer, a friendly gesture, nothing more. Damien accepted with a small smile that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. Her apartment was small but comfortable, stuffed with books on every available surface. Shelves lined the walls. Paperbacks were stacked on the coffee table. A hardcover served as a coaster for her coffee mug. Damien surveyed the literary chaos with something like wonder. "You weren't kidding about the book thing," he said. "I have a problem. I've accepted it." He pulled a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice from a shelf, handling it with the reverence it deserved. "First edition?" "God, no. I'm not made of money. That's my comfort copy. Read it so many times the spine is held together by hope and stubbornness." He smiled, that soft smile she was starting to recognize. "I like that." She fetched a water bottle from the kitchen, and when she returned, he was examining her bookshelf like it held the secrets of the universe. "You have excellent taste," he said, "except for this." He held up a dog-eared thriller. "That's a guilty pleasure. It's objectively terrible. It has a talking dog. That doesn't make it good. The dog solves crimes, Damien." They argued about literary merit for 20 minutes, and somewhere in the middle of debating whether talking animals improved or diminished serious fiction, Haley realized she was having the best time she'd had in months. He left with the borrowed water bottle and a promise to return it. He came back 2 days later at her door with the bottle and a first-edition Hemingway. "A replacement," he said, "for the one your college roommate stole." Haley stared at the book, then at him, then at the book again. "This is worth thousands of dollars," she whispered. "Hydration is important," he said. "So is literature." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She settled for clutching the book to her chest and calling him ridiculous. His smile was worth more than any first edition. The invitation came casually, tossed into conversation like an afterthought. "You should see the penthouse," Damien said while they were cooling down after class. "I just renovated the terrace, pool and everything." "You have a pool on your terrace. It's practical." "In what universe is a rooftop pool practical?" "The universe where I own the building." Haley rolled her eyes so hard she worried they might get stuck. "Fine. One visit. Just to see this allegedly practical pool." "Saturday?" "Saturday." She told herself it was curiosity, architectural interest, a perfectly reasonable desire to see how the other half lived. She did not tell herself that she spent 2 hours choosing an outfit, changed 4 times, and ultimately went with jeans and a silk blouse that she hoped screamed casual elegance rather than trying too hard. The building was in Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhood, all glass and steel and doormen in uniforms that cost more than her monthly rent. The elevator required a special keycard and rose so smoothly she barely felt the motion. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Haley's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city, the skyline glittering like scattered diamonds. The space was vast but somehow warm, rich wood floors, comfortable furniture, art on the walls that was probably priceless but felt chosen for love rather than status. And the terrace. Dear God, the terrace. The pool stretched along the edge, infinity style, blending seamlessly with the sky. Lounge chairs were arranged artfully around it. Plants in elegant pots softened the modern lines. "This is ridiculous," Haley breathed. Damien stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her reaction with barely concealed pleasure. "You hate it?" "I hate that I love it." He laughed, that deep, genuine sound she was becoming addicted to. "Come on, I'll give you the tour." The tour took an hour because Haley kept getting distracted. The kitchen with its professional-grade appliances and marble countertops, the library, an entire room dedicated to books that made her apartment collection look like a sad afterthought. The home gym, which explained why he was built like a Greek statue. They ended up on the terrace as the sun began to set, sitting on lounge chairs with glasses of wine that probably cost more than her car. "I could live here," Haley said dreamily, then immediately regretted it. I mean not live here, I just mean it's nice. Very nice. Architecturally. Damien's eyes crinkled. Architecturally. Shut up. They talked as the sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. About his travels, his work, the loneliness that came with success. About her dreams, her fears, the way she sometimes felt stuck in a life that was comfortable, but not quite right. He listened like everything she said mattered. He asked questions that made her think. He shared pieces of himself that she suspected he didn't share with many people. The hours slipped away like water through fingers. When she finally left, flustered and warm from wine and conversation, she realized she hadn't thought about the wealth surrounding them once. She'd just thought about him. The following week, everything changed. Haley arrived at the penthouse for what had become their Saturday routine. Damien was in a meeting that ran late, so she waited in the living room, idly flipping through the magazines on his coffee table. One cover stopped her cold. There he was. Damien Gallagher in a perfectly tailored suit, photographed against the backdrop of one of his hotels. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Billionaire hotelier expands empire. Inside Damien Gallagher's global domination." Billionaire. The word echoed in her head like a gong. She'd known he was wealthy. 23 hotels didn't come cheap. But seeing it spelled out so starkly, seeing his face on a magazine cover, seeing the word billionaire attached to his name like a title, her stomach dropped. She thought about her tiny apartment stuffed with second-hand books, her 10-year-old car, her student loans, the silk blouse she'd bought on sale and considered a splurge. What was she doing here? What could a man like him possibly see in a woman like her? The door opened and Damien walked in, loosening his tie, apologizing for the delay. He stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" Haley held up the magazine. "Nothing. Just light reading." He glanced at the cover, and something flickered across his expression. Wariness, maybe, or resignation. "That was last year. I hate that photo. You look very commanding." "I look constipated. The photographer kept telling me to look intense." She didn't laugh. Couldn't. Damien sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Haley, it's just a magazine. It says you're worth $4 billion. Numbers on paper." "That's a lot of paper." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face with those intelligent eyes. "Does it bother you?" "Yes," she wanted to scream. "It bothers me because I don't know why you're spending time with me. It bothers me because I'm just a graphic designer with a book obsession, and you could have anyone, literally anyone, and none of this makes sense." Instead, she said, "I should go." She gathered her bag, avoiding his gaze. He didn't try to stop her, but she felt his eyes on her the whole way to the elevator. At home, surrounded by her books and her modest life, she told herself this was for the best. Whatever was happening between them, it couldn't lead anywhere good. They were from different worlds. She ignored the ache in her chest and pretended it didn't exist. Haley avoided the gym for 3 days. She told herself it was because she was busy. Work deadlines, a fictional dentist appointment, a sudden inexplicable need to reorganize her entire bookshelf alphabetically. On the 4th day, her phone buzzed. "You're not avoiding me, are you?" She stared at Damien's message for a full minute before typing back, "I don't know what you're talking about. You missed 3 classes. I've been busy." "Reorganizing your bookshelf?" She nearly dropped her phone. "How did you know that?" "Lucky guess, same time tomorrow." Haley wanted to say no, she really did, but her fingers apparently had other plans. The next morning, she walked into the gym with her chin held high and her walls firmly in place. She would be polite, professional, distant. Damien was already there, warming up by the mats. He looked up when she entered, and his face did something complicated, relief and concern, and something softer that she refused to analyze. "You came. I said I would. You also said you'd been busy." "I was. With your bookshelf." It was very disorganized. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't push. They stretched in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Class started. They paired up automatically, muscle memory overriding emotional turmoil. The instructor demonstrated a new technique, a takedown that required precise timing and leverage. "Your turn," Damien said, positioning himself. Haley took a breath and executed the move exactly as shown. She felt the momentum shift, felt her body move correctly, and then she was on her back again, staring at the ceiling. "Better," Damien said, offering his hand. "You almost had me." "Almost doesn't count. It counts more than you think." She took his hand and let him pull her up. Their faces were close, closer than necessary. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw. She stepped back quickly. After class, Damien caught up with her by the lockers. "I have a proposition. I'm not interested in propositions from billionaires. Hear me out." He leaned against the locker next to hers, arms crossed, expression serious but with that ever-present hint of mischief. 2 months. 2 months for what? "If you can take me down, legitimately take me down, in 2 months, I'll pay for your dinners for a year. Any restaurant you want." Haley narrowed her eyes. "And if I can't?" "Then you admit I'm the superior fighter. That's it? I just have to admit the obvious?" Ouch. He clutched his chest in mock offense. "Your faith in me is overwhelming." She should have said no. It was clearly a ploy, a transparent excuse to keep her coming to the gym, to keep spending time together. She wasn't stupid, but she was also competitive. Annoyingly, irrationally competitive. "Fine," she heard herself say. 2 months. "Then I want documentation of my victory for posterity." Confident. Realistic. His smile was slow, satisfied, like a cat who'd just gotten exactly what he wanted. "Then it's a deal." They shook on it. His hand engulfed hers, warm and solid, and he held on just a second too long. The bet changed everything. Suddenly their gym sessions had purpose beyond vague self-improvement. Damien took her training seriously. Too seriously, some might say. He adjusted her stance with meticulous attention, his hands positioning her hips, her shoulders, her arms. "Your center of gravity is off," he said during their 3rd session that week. "My center of gravity is fine. It's too high. You'll never generate enough force." His palm pressed against her lower back, guiding her into the correct position. "There. Feel the difference?" She felt something, all right. It had nothing to do with gravity. "Now try again." She tried. She failed. She tried again. Damien was patient in a way that surprised her. He never mocked her mistakes, never made her feel small for struggling. He simply corrected, encouraged, and occasionally smirked when she got particularly frustrated. "You're enjoying this," she accused after her 12th failed attempt at a hip throw. "I'm enjoying watching you learn." "You're enjoying watching me fail." "That too." He caught her glare and laughed. "You're improving, Haley. More than you realize." She didn't believe him, but something warm bloomed in her chest anyway. Their sessions extended beyond the official classes. Early mornings became their time. Him teaching her techniques, her practicing until her muscles screamed, both of them pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. He started calling her dangerous. "Why dangerous?" she asked one morning, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Because you don't know your own strength. I literally cannot take you down." "Yet," he handed her a water bottle, his fingers brushing hers, "the dangerous ones are always underestimated." She rolled her eyes, but the nickname stuck. He'd say it with that dry, ironic tone. Dangerous, and she'd feel a flutter she absolutely refused to acknowledge. Outside the gym, things shifted too. He texted her articles about self-defense techniques. She sent him pictures of books she thought he'd like. They had dinner twice, lunch 3 times, and spent an entire Saturday watching terrible action movies on his ridiculously large television. The magazine incident wasn't mentioned. The wealth wasn't discussed. They existed in a bubble where none of that mattered, where they were just 2 people who made each other laugh. It couldn't last. Haley knew that. But for now, she let herself pretend. 3 weeks into the bet, Haley discovered something unexpected. She was actually getting better. Not good enough to take down Damien. That remained a distant fantasy, but better. Her reflexes were sharper. Her confidence had grown. She no longer flinched when someone came at her during drills. "You're holding back," she accused Damien after a session where she'd almost caught him off guard. "I'm being careful. You're being patronizing. I'm being a gentleman. I don't want a gentleman. I want a real opponent." Something flickered in his eyes. Heat, maybe, or admiration. "Careful what you wish for, dangerous." The nickname had evolved. It started as irony, became habit, and somewhere along the way turned into something that sounded almost like an endearment. She pretended not to notice. He pretended he didn't mean it. Their routine had settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously domestic. Morning training, coffee after, occasional dinners that lasted too long. He corrected her posture everywhere now, at restaurants, in line at the grocery store, once in the middle of a bookshop when she was reaching for a high shelf. "Your shoulder," he'd murmur, hand pressing gently on her back. "You're going to strain something." "I'm reaching for a book, not lifting weights." Bad habits form in small moments. "You're insufferable. You keep showing up." She had no argument for that. The gym had become their unofficial territory. The other members knew not to interrupt when they were training together. The receptionist had stopped asking if they needed separate lockers. Margaret, the older woman from their first class, had started calling them the lovebirds, with zero irony. Then Ryan appeared. He was new, a young instructor hired to assist with the beginner classes. Mid-20s, conventionally handsome, with the kind of easy smile that probably worked wonders on most women. Haley noticed him the way she noticed any new person, briefly without particular interest. Ryan apparently noticed her differently. It started during stretching. He wandered over while she was working on her flexibility. Damien momentarily occupied with a conversation across the room. "Your form is really improving," Ryan said, crouching beside her. "I've been watching your progress." "Thanks." She shifted into a deeper stretch, not particularly interested in conversation. "Have you thought about private lessons? I could help you develop a more personalized routine." "I already have a training partner." "Right, the big guy." Ryan glanced toward Damien, then back to her with a conspiratorial smile. "But sometimes it helps to have a different perspective, someone closer to your level." Haley blinked. Was he insulting Damien, complimenting her, flirting? She couldn't tell, and frankly, she didn't care. "I'm good, thanks." Ryan didn't take the hint. Over the following days, he found reasons to be wherever she was, offering unsolicited advice during her warm-ups, standing too close during demonstrations, laughing at things she said that weren't particularly funny. Damien noticed. Of course Damien noticed. His jaw would tighten whenever Ryan approached. His corrections became more frequent, more proprietary. Hand on her waist during balance exercises, fingers adjusting her grip with unnecessary precision. "Your elbow," he said during one session, moving to stand directly behind her, his chest nearly touching her back. "Keep it tucked." "My elbow is fine." "It's not." His voice was low, meant only for her. Again. She tried the movement again, hyper-aware of his presence, of the warmth radiating from his body. Across the room, Ryan watched with a frown. The situation came to a head during a Thursday afternoon class. The instructor announced partner rotations, and before Haley could position herself near Damien, Ryan appeared at her side. "Looks like we're paired up," he said cheerfully. Haley opened her mouth to protest, but the instructor was already moving on. She caught Damien's eye across the room. His expression was carefully neutral, but his arms were crossed and his jaw could have cut diamonds. The drill was simple, practice escaping from holds. Ryan explained the technique with excessive detail, his hands lingering on her arms as he demonstrated. "You need to really commit to the movement," he said, stepping closer. "Here, let me show you." "I think she's got it." Damien materialized beside them, a wall of muscle and barely contained tension. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "Just offering some guidance," Ryan said, not quite backing down. "She has guidance." Damien's hand landed on Haley's shoulder. Casual, possessive, unmistakable. "Let's switch the exercise. Partner drills work better with consistent partners." It wasn't a suggestion. Ryan's smile faltered. He glanced at Haley, perhaps hoping for support, but she was too busy processing the territorial display to respond. "Sure," Ryan said finally. "Whatever works." He retreated. Damien stayed. "That was subtle," Haley said once they were alone. "I have no idea what you mean." "You practically marked your territory." "I corrected a training inefficiency." "Is that what we're calling it?" His hand was still on her shoulder. He didn't remove it. "He was distracting you," Damien said quietly. "You need to focus if you're going to win our bet." "Right, the bet. That's what this is about." "What else would it be about?" Their eyes met. The air between them crackled with something neither of them was willing to name. Haley stepped back first. "Fine. Let's train. Let's train," he agreed. But when Ryan looked their way for the rest of the class, Damien made sure to stand just a little closer, touch her just a little more often. He wasn't subtle at all, and Haley found, to her surprise, that she didn't mind. The invitation came wrapped in casual indifference, as if Damien hadn't spent considerable time crafting it. "Some friends are coming over Saturday," he said while they cooled down after training. "Dinner at the penthouse. You should come." Haley paused mid-stretch. "Your friends?" "No, random strangers I found on the street." He raised an eyebrow. "Yes, my friends." "I didn't know you had friends." "Hilarious." "I try." She resumed stretching, attempting to appear nonchalant while her mind raced. Meeting his friends felt significant. It felt like a step towards something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. "It's just dinner," Damien added, as if reading her thoughts. "Low pressure. Good food. Possibly terrible conversation, depending on how much wine Marcus drinks." "Marcus? He owns a chain of architecture firms. Brilliant designer, questionable storyteller. After 3 glasses of wine, every anecdote becomes a 40-minute saga." Haley laughed despite herself. "Sounds entertaining. That's one word for it." He stood, offering her a hand up. "So? Saturday?" She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Their faces were close, too close, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Fine," she said finally, "but if Marcus talks for more than 30 minutes about anything, I'm leaving." "Deal." Saturday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation Haley hadn't felt since her first job interview. She changed outfits 5 times, eventually settling on fitted black pants and an emerald silk top that brought out the green in her eyes. Not too fancy, not too casual. The perfect balance of trying without appearing to try. She arrived at the penthouse as the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The elevator doors opened to reveal Damien in dark jeans and a white button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking unfairly handsome in a way that should probably be illegal. "You came," he said, and the warmth in his voice made her stomach flip. "I said I would. You also said you'd beat me in 2 weeks. Some promises are more reliable than others. The bet isn't over yet." His smile was slow, appreciative. "No, it isn't." The penthouse had been transformed. The dining table was set with elegant simplicity, white linens, candles, fresh flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The terrace doors were open, letting in the evening breeze and the glittering view of the city below. "This is beautiful," Haley breathed. "I have a good caterer. You also have good taste." "I'm aware." His eyes lingered on her face a moment too long. "The others should be here soon. Drink?" He poured her a glass of wine that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, and they settled on the terrace to wait. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did between them now. She told him about a difficult client at work. He told her about a hotel opening that had nearly given his operations team collective heart attacks. The doorbell chimed. "That would be the chaos," Damien said, standing. "Prepare yourself." The chaos arrived in the form of 3 people who immediately filled the penthouse with warmth and noise. Marcus Chen was the architect, tall, Asian American, with an easy smile and the kind of creative energy that seemed to crackle around him. He shook Haley's hand with genuine enthusiasm. "So, you're the one who's been keeping our friend occupied," he said. "I was starting to think he'd joined a cult. He's been impossible to reach." "I've been busy," Damien said flatly. "Busy?" Marcus grinned at Haley. "Is that what we're calling it?" Victoria Blake was the lawyer, sharp-featured, impeccably dressed, with a wit that could cut glass. She assessed Haley with intelligent eyes and apparently decided she approved. "Thank God," Victoria said, taking Haley's hands in hers. "Someone who might actually make him tolerable. Do you know how insufferable he's been lately? Constantly checking his phone, smiling at nothing, leaving events early. We thought he was having a breakdown." "I don't smile at nothing," Damien protested. "You smiled at a spreadsheet last week. It was a good spreadsheet." James Whitfield completed the trio, the businessman, relaxed and charming, with the kind of easy confidence that came from genuine self-assurance rather than arrogance. He greeted Haley with a warm handshake and an approving nod toward Damien. "She's real," James said. I owe Marcus $20. You bet on whether I existed, Haley asked. We bet on whether Damien was capable of sustained human interaction outside of business meetings. The jury was out. I interact with humans, Damien said. Ordering employees around doesn't count. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Haley had expected to feel like an outsider, the interloper in an established group. Instead, she found herself drawn into their orbit, as if she'd always belonged there. Marcus told stories that were, as promised, entirely too long but genuinely entertaining. Victoria offered sharp observations that made Haley laugh until her sides hurt. James had a gift for steering conversation away from awkward topics and toward genuinely interesting ones. And through it all, they treated her like she mattered, not like Damien's date, not like a curiosity to be examined, like a person they were genuinely happy to meet. He talks about you constantly, Victoria confided while the men were distracted by a debate about some sports game. I've known Damien for 15 years. He's never talked about anyone like this. Haley felt heat rise to her cheeks. We're just friends. Victoria's smile was knowing. Of course you are. Dinner was excellent. The kind of food that melted on the tongue and made regular restaurant fare seem pedestrian by comparison. They ate on the terrace, surrounded by candlelight and city views, and Haley found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected. You two make a beautiful couple, Marcus said as dessert was served, because apparently subtlety was not in his vocabulary. Haley choked on her wine. We're not, she started. She's my training partner, Damien said smoothly. Is that what we're calling it? James asked, echoing Marcus's earlier sentiment. That's what it is. Right. Victoria's tone dripped with skepticism. Training partners who have dinner together every week, text constantly, and look at each other like the rest of the world doesn't exist. We don't look at each other like that, Haley protested. All three friends turned to stare at her with identical expressions of disbelief. You're doing it right now, Marcus pointed out. Haley realized she had in fact been gazing at Damien while he refilled her wine glass. She looked away quickly, face burning. Damien, for his part, seemed entirely unbothered. More wine? Please. The friends exchanged glances that communicated entire volumes. As the evening wore on, Haley found herself studying the dynamics of the group. They were successful, wealthy, sophisticated, everything she wasn't, and yet they welcomed her without reservation, asked about her work with genuine interest, laughed at her jokes, included her in inside references, and immediately explained them when she looked confused. You're good for him, James said quietly, while the others were arguing about which terrible action movie was the worst. I haven't seen him this happy in years. Haley didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure she was good for anyone, wasn't sure she had anything to offer a man who could have anything he wanted. But when Damien caught her eye across the table and smiled, that soft, private smile that seemed reserved just for her, she wanted to believe it. Maybe that was enough. For now, at least. Maybe that was enough. The evening was winding down beautifully. Dessert plates had been cleared, coffee had been served, and the conversation had mellowed into the comfortable rhythm of old friends enjoying each other's company. Haley was laughing at one of Marcus's architectural disasters, a building where he'd accidentally designed a bathroom without a door, when the doorbell chimed. Everyone paused. Are we expecting someone? Victoria asked. Damien frowned. No. He rose to answer, and Haley watched him cross the penthouse with that confident stride she'd come to know so well. The door opened, and a woman swept in like she owned the place. She was striking. Tall, blonde, dressed in heels that could double as weapons, and a dress that left little to the imagination. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Damien, she exclaimed, her voice carrying across the room. I hope I'm not interrupting. She was clearly interrupting. She clearly didn't care. Vivian. Damien's tone was polite, but cool. This is unexpected. I was just dropping off Marcus's spare key. He left it at my apartment last week. She held up a key that could have been delivered at literally any other time. I didn't realize you were having a party. Her eyes swept the room, cataloguing the guests with practiced efficiency. They landed on Haley and narrowed almost imperceptibly. This is Vivian, Marcus said, rising with an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. My sister. Half-sister, Vivian corrected, already moving toward Damien with the determination of a heat-seeking missile. She placed a manicured hand on his arm, fingers curling possessively. "It's been too long, Damien. We should catch up." Haley watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Vivian was everything she wasn't. Glamorous, sophisticated, clearly at home in this world of penthouses and billions. She laughed too loudly at something Damien said, touched his arm repeatedly, asked questions that seemed designed to exclude everyone else from the conversation. "Remember that weekend in Monaco?" Vivian was saying. "The hotel opening? You were so charming with the investors." "That was 4 years ago," Damien said. "Some memories are worth keeping." Her smile was predatory. Haley's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She wasn't jealous. She had no right to be jealous. They weren't together. They were training partners. Friends at most. But watching Vivian drape herself over Damien like an expensive accessory made something hot and uncomfortable twist in her chest. Victoria caught her eye and made a face that clearly communicated solidarity. James looked like he was calculating the fastest way to remove Vivian from the premises. Marcus just looked mortified. "So," Vivian said, finally acknowledging the rest of the room, "who's the new girl?" The question was directed at Damien, as if Haley wasn't capable of introducing herself. "Haley," she said, standing. "I'm Haley." "Lovely." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And how do you know our Damien?" "Our Damien," the possessive pronoun grated. "We trained together," Haley said. "Self-defense." "Oh, how practical." Vivian turned back to Damien, dismissing Haley entirely. "I've been meaning to ask about that new property in Bali. Father mentioned you might be looking for investors." The conversation shifted to business matters that Haley couldn't follow and didn't particularly want to. She stood there, coffee cup in hand, feeling increasingly invisible. This was his world. These were the people he belonged with. Beautiful, wealthy, connected. People who discussed international properties over casual dinner parties. People who wore designer clothes like second skins. What was she doing here? The thought crystallized into action. Haley set down her cup and reached for her purse. "I should go," she announced. "My dog needs food." Every head in the room turned to look at her. "You don't have a dog," Damien said. The words hung in the air. Haley realized with dawning horror that she had in fact mentioned her pet-free status multiple times during their conversations. "I'm getting one," she tried. "When?" "Soon." "How soon?" "Very soon. Imminently. Any day now. So I should go prepare. For the dog. That I'm getting." She was babbling. She knew she was babbling. She couldn't stop. Victoria pressed her lips together, clearly fighting a smile. James suddenly found his coffee fascinating. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor on behalf of both his sister and the train wreck currently unfolding. Vivian just looked smug. Haley grabbed her bag and headed for the door. She made it approximately 2 steps before a large hand closed around her wrist. Damien had moved faster than she'd thought possible. He stood beside her now, his grip firm but gentle, his expression unreadable. "Don't go," he said quietly. "I really should—" "Haley." His other hand found her waist, pulling her back toward him. "Don't." The room had gone silent. Haley could feel everyone watching. Victoria with barely concealed delight, James with approval, Marcus with relief, and Vivian with something that looked distinctly like irritation. "You already have company," Haley said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Female company." Understanding dawned in Damien's eyes, then something else. Amusement, maybe, or affection. "She's leaving," he said simply. "I just got here," Vivian protested. "You dropped off a key." Damien didn't take his eyes off Haley. "The key has been dropped. Thank you for stopping by." "But—" Marcus was already on his feet, gently but firmly guiding his sister toward the door. "Come on, Viv. I'll walk you out." "This is ridiculous. Very ridiculous. Let's go be ridiculous in the elevator." The door closed behind them. Silence settled over the penthouse. Haley stood frozen, acutely aware of Damien's hand still on her waist, his body close to hers. Her face was burning. Everyone had witnessed her jealousy, her ridiculous excuse, her complete inability to handle seeing another woman flirt with him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That was adorable," Victoria supplied. "Entertaining," James added. "Deeply embarrassing," Haley finished. Damien's thumb traced a small circle on her hip. You were jealous. I was not. You invented a dog. Dogs are wonderful animals. I might genuinely get one. You're allergic. I'll take medication. His laugh was low, private, meant just for her. You were jealous, he repeated, and this time it wasn't a question. Haley's defenses crumbled. Fine, maybe, a little. But in my defense, she was all over you. I didn't notice. You're lying. I'm not. His eyes were dark, intense. I didn't notice because I was too busy trying to figure out how to make her leave without being rude. I've been trying to figure that out since she walked in. Something warm bloomed in Haley's chest. Really? Really? His grip on her waist tightened slightly. There's only one woman in this room I want to notice. The air between them crackled. Haley was dimly aware that they had an audience, that this was neither the time nor the place, that she should step back and regain some dignity. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was. Damien's expression shifted. A decision made. A line about to be crossed. Come with me, he said, and before she could respond, he'd swept her off her feet, literally, actually off her feet, and was striding toward the terrace. What are you? He jumped into the pool. The water was warm, but the shock was cold. Haley surfaced with a gasp, her carefully chosen outfit completely ruined, her hair plastered to her face, her dignity somewhere at the bottom of the pool. Damien emerged beside her, grinning like a maniac. Better? You lunatic. These were nice pants. I'll buy you new ones. That's not the point. What is the point? She opened her mouth to respond, but he was suddenly close, too close, his hands finding her waist beneath the water, pulling her against him. Their bodies pressed together, wet and warm and electric. His head dipped, his lips brushed her neck, soft, deliberate, devastating. Haley forgot how to breathe. He kissed the curve of her throat, the spot just below her ear, the line of her jaw. Each touch was careful, controlled, a promise of more. Her hands gripped his shoulders, nails digging into solid muscle. Damien, she breathed. There are people watching. I know. We should probably stop. Probably. He didn't stop. His mouth traced her collarbone, sending shivers down her spine despite the warm water. Do you want me to stop? No. The answer was immediate and undeniable. She wanted him to never stop. She wanted to stay in this pool forever, his hands on her, his mouth on her skin, the rest of the world forgotten. But she also wanted to do this right, not in front of his friends, not as a jealous reaction to someone else. Yes, she said reluctantly. For now. He pulled back, and the loss of contact was almost painful. But he was smiling, that soft, private smile, and his hands stayed on her waist. For now, he agreed. They made their way to the pool's edge, dripping and disheveled. Victoria was applauding. James was laughing. Marcus had returned from seeing his sister out and looked thoroughly delighted. Well, Victoria said, that was the most dramatic way I've ever seen someone end a conversation about Bali real estate. Damien helped Haley out of the pool, wrapping her in a towel that appeared from nowhere. The conversation needed ending. Clearly. They spent the rest of the evening in borrowed clothes, one of Damien's t-shirts swimming on Haley's frame, with the friends gathered around the terrace, talking and laughing, as if nothing unusual had happened. But everything had changed. Haley felt it in the way Damien's hand kept finding hers, in the secret glances they shared, in the promise that hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. Something had begun. And she was terrified of how much she wanted to see where it went. The days following the pool incident existed in a strange limbo. Nothing had technically changed. They still trained together every morning, still shared coffee afterward, still texted throughout the day about nothing and everything, but beneath the familiar routine something new hummed, an awareness, an anticipation, a constant low-level electricity that made every casual touch feel significant. Damien didn't push. He seemed content to let things unfold at their own pace, offering small gestures instead of grand declarations, a hand on her lower back as they walked, fingers brushing hers when he passed her a water bottle. That look, heated and patient and promising, that made her forget how to form coherent sentences. Haley was simultaneously grateful and frustrated. She wanted him to push. She wanted him to kiss her properly, without an audience, without interruption. She wanted to stop pretending that every cell in her body wasn't attuned to his presence, but she was also terrified, because this felt real in a way nothing had before, and real things could break. So they existed in limbo, and Haley told herself she was fine with it. Then came Tuesday. She was running errands downtown, nothing special. Dry cleaning pickup, a stop at the bookstore, a desperate need for decent coffee after a morning of difficult clients. The cafe on Lexington was her favorite, a quiet spot with excellent espresso and windows perfect for people watching. She was about to push through the door when she saw them. Damien sat at a corner table, leaning forward with unusual intensity. Across from him was a woman, beautiful, elegant, dressed in a cream blazer that probably cost more than Haley's entire wardrobe. Dark hair swept into a sophisticated chignon, flawless makeup, the kind of effortless grace that came from a lifetime of privilege. They were deep in conversation. The woman touched Damien's hand across the table. He didn't pull away. Haley's stomach dropped. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, coffee forgotten, watching through the window as Damien smiled at something the woman said. It wasn't his polite smile, the one he used for business. It was warm, genuine, familiar. The woman laughed, and Damien's expression softened in a way that made Haley's heart crack. Who was she? The question burned. A business associate, an old friend, an ex-girlfriend, a current girlfriend. Had Haley been fooling herself this entire time? Had she read everything wrong? The pool, the neck kisses, the way he looked at her. Had it all been a game? She turned and walked away before she could do something stupid, like storm in and demand explanations. She had no right to demand anything. They weren't together. They'd never defined what they were. For all she knew, Damien had a rotation of women he took to self-defense class and threw into pools. The thought made her physically ill. She went home, ignored 3 texts from Damien, and spent the evening aggressively reorganizing her bookshelf by color instead of author. It was petty and pointless and deeply unsatisfying. Her phone buzzed again. Everything okay? You're quiet today. She stared at the message, trying to compose a response that didn't sound accusatory or pathetic. Fine. Just busy. Too busy for coffee tomorrow? Yes. Absolutely. She was far too busy to sit across from him and pretend she hadn't seen him with another woman. Too busy to wonder who that elegant stranger was and what she meant to him. Maybe. The maybe hung there, loaded with everything she couldn't say. The next morning she skipped the gym. The morning after that she went early and left before he arrived. Avoidance wasn't mature, but maturity was overrated. On Thursday, Marcus texted her. She hadn't even known Marcus had her number. Whatever you think you saw, you're wrong. Ask him. Haley stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just talk to him, please. The plea surprised her. Marcus barely knew her. Why would he care if she and Damien communicated? Unless there was something worth saving. She showed up at the gym that afternoon. Damien was already there, attacking a punching bag with more force than strictly necessary. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face, relief maybe, or hope. You've been avoiding me, he said without preamble. I've been busy. You've been avoiding me. She dropped her gym bag on the bench. I saw you Tuesday, at the cafe on Lexington. With a woman. The words came out harder than she intended. Accusation wrapped in hurt she couldn't quite hide. Damien's brow furrowed. Then realization dawned and, unexpectedly, he laughed. This isn't funny, Haley snapped. It's a little funny. He crossed the distance between them, stopping close enough that she could smell his cologne beneath the sweat. That was Elena, my cousin. She's a partner in 3 of my hotels. Haley blinked. Your cousin? My father's brother's daughter. We were discussing the Monaco property, the one that's been giving me headaches for 6 months. But she touched your hand. She's Italian. She touches everyone's everything. It's cultural. She was beautiful. She's also married to a very large man named Roberto, who would cheerfully dismember anyone who looked at her inappropriately. Damien's expression softened. Haley, there's no one else. There hasn't been anyone else since you walked into that gym and told me you let me win. The fight drained out of her. She felt ridiculous, jumping to conclusions, avoiding him for days, letting jealousy override common sense. "I'm an idiot," she muttered. "You're not. I invented a dog last week, and now I'm accusing your cousin of being your secret girlfriend. I'm clearly losing my mind." His hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "You were jealous." "Again. You need to stop enjoying that so much." "Never." His thumb traced her jaw, feather-light. "For the record, I haven't looked at another woman since the day you fell on that mat and told me you let me win. I couldn't even if I wanted to. You're all I see." Haley's breath caught. "Damien, I'm going to wait," he said quietly, "until you're ready, until you trust this. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking for anyone else. Just you." She wanted to kiss him. The urge was overwhelming, primal, undeniable, but he was right. She needed to trust this first, trust him, trust herself. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay. I believe you." His smile was like sunrise. "Good. Now let's train. You still owe me a proper takedown." She laughed, the tension finally breaking. "You're impossible." "You like it?" She did. God help her, she really did. The weeks that followed were an exquisite torture. They trained together every morning, bodies close, touches lingering. Almost kisses interrupted by arriving classmates. Moments that stretched toward something more, only to be broken by timing, circumstance, or Haley's own hesitation. She wasn't ready. That was the excuse she clung to. In truth, she was terrified of how much she wanted him, terrified of the intensity building between them, terrified that once she let herself fall, there would be no climbing back out. So she held back, and Damien, patient, infuriating, wonderful Damien, let her. "Your technique is improving," he said one morning as they practiced the takedown she'd been working on for weeks, "but still not good enough to beat you. Give it time. The bet deadline is in 3 weeks. Then you'd better practice harder." His hands adjusted her stance, warm through the fabric of her workout clothes. Again. She tried the move again, and again. Each time she got closer. Each time he caught her at the last moment, his body moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd been doing this for years. "You're anticipating," she accused. "I'm experienced. There's a difference." Same result. Not quite. He positioned himself in front of her, arms open. "Try something different. Stop thinking so much." "I'm not thinking. You're thinking so loudly I can hear it." She lunged at him without warning. No technique, no plan, just instinct. He caught her easily, but his surprised laugh told her she'd at least managed to be unpredictable. "Better," he said, hands steady on her arms. "Do that again." They were alone in the gym, early enough that no one else had arrived, late enough that the morning cleaning crew had finished. The air felt charged, intimate. Haley attacked again, this time with a combination she'd been practicing secretly. She got close, so close, but at the last second her foot caught on the mat edge. The pop in her ankle was audible. She went down hard, pain shooting up her leg, and for a moment all she could do was gasp. Damien was beside her instantly. "Don't move." "I wasn't planning to." "What happened?" "My foot caught on—" She tried to shift and hissed at the pain. "Ow, ow, ow, ow." His hands were already on her ankle, probing gently with surprising delicacy for someone his size. His brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not broken," he said after a moment. "Probably a sprain. But we should get ice on it. I can walk. You absolutely cannot." Before she could protest, he'd scooped her up, one arm under her knees, one around her back, and was carrying her toward the exit like she weighed nothing at all. "Damien, this is unnecessary." "You're welcome." "I didn't say thank you." "You were about to." She wasn't, but she also wasn't complaining. Being held against his chest was nice. More than nice. His arms were solid, his heartbeat steady against her cheek, and he smelled like clean sweat and that cologne she'd come to associate with safety. He carried her to his car, parked as always in the premium spot closest to the door, and deposited her carefully in the passenger seat. The drive to his penthouse was short, and he spent most of it stealing worried glances at her ankle. "I'm fine," she said for the 4th time. "You're grimacing." "That's my normal face." "It's not." The elevator ride was quiet. He carried her again despite her protests and settled her on the massive couch in his living room, with her foot propped on pillows. Then he disappeared. He returned with ice packs, compression bandages, painkillers, and a first aid kit that looked like it belonged in a hospital. "Do you perform surgery in your spare time?" Haley asked. "I like to be prepared." He knelt in front of her, cradling her injured foot with impossible gentleness. "This might hurt. I can handle it." He began wrapping her ankle, his movements careful, precise. His fingers were warm against her skin, and despite the pain, she found herself mesmerized by his focus. This was a man who ran a global empire, who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals. And here he was on his knees, tending to her twisted ankle like it was the most important task in the world. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "You're being very nurturing. Is that surprising?" "A little." He finished the wrap and sat back, his hand resting on her calf. "I told you. I believe in protecting what matters." The words hung in the air between them. What matters? Did she matter to him? The evidence suggested yes. The patience, the care, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. But hearing it, almost hearing it, made her chest ache. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For this." "You're welcome." His thumb traced a small circle on her leg. "Stay here tonight." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "Your ankle needs rest. My guest room has everything you need, and I can keep an eye on the swelling." A reasonable offer. Medical prudence. Nothing more. Then why did her entire body feel like it was vibrating? "I don't have clothes." "I have clothes. I don't have my things." "What things do you need that I can't provide?" She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He had a point. A frustrating, logical point. "Fine," she said. "One night." His smile was quiet, satisfied. One night. He made dinner, actual dinner, cooked himself, because apparently billionaires could also be domestic. They ate on the couch, her foot in his lap, watching terrible action movies and arguing about plot holes. When she yawned, he carried her to the guest room, enormous, elegant, with a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds. "Good night, Dangerous," he said from the doorway. "Good night, Damien." He paused, something flickering in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might cross the room, might close the distance, might finally end this beautiful torment. Instead, he smiled and closed the door. Haley lay in the darkness, her ankle throbbing, her heart pounding, and realized with perfect clarity that she was in love with him. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Her ankle healed slowly, which meant weeks of modified training and Damien hovering like a particularly handsome mother hen. "I can do squats," Haley insisted. "So you can do seated exercises. My ankle is fine. Your ankle is recovering." He handed her a resistance band with the authority of a man who would not be argued with. Upper body today. She wanted to be annoyed. She really did. But there was something unbearably sweet about his concern, the way he monitored her movements, adjusted exercises to protect her injury, refused to let her push too hard, too fast. "You're insufferable," she told him daily. "For you keep showing up," he replied also daily. It became their rhythm. The weeks passed in a haze of almost moments, training sessions where their bodies moved together, close enough to feel each other's heat, coffee dates where their hands brushed across the table, evenings at the penthouse where they sat side by side, shoulders touching, the air between them thick with everything unsaid, and the almost kisses. God, the almost kisses. They happened constantly now. A moment where his eyes would drop to her lips, where he'd lean in just slightly, where the world would hold its breath, and then someone would walk in. A phone would ring, reality would intrude. It was maddening. One evening they were alone on his terrace, the city glittering below them, a bottle of wine half empty between them. The conversation had drifted into comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Damien's hand found hers in the darkness. "The bet ends next week," he said quietly. Haley's heart clenched. "I know. You haven't managed to take me down yet. I'm aware. Does that bother you?" She considered the question. In the beginning, the bet had felt like a challenge, something to prove, a goal to achieve. Now it felt like an excuse, a reason to keep showing up, a framework for something that had grown far beyond its original boundaries. "Not really," she admitted. "Does that bother you?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely heard. "I need to tell you something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just—" He exhaled, ran his free hand through his hair. "The bet was never about the bet. I'm going to need more words than that." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "When I proposed it, I told myself it was about training, about helping you improve, but that was a lie." He turned to face her, his eyes dark and serious in the dim light. "I was terrified you were going to leave." Haley's breath caught. "Leave? After you saw that magazine, the way you looked at me, like I'd become someone else, like the money had changed who I was in your eyes." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't stand it. I needed a reason to keep you close, something that would guarantee you'd keep showing up. So you invented a bet." "I invented a bet." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pathetic, right? Billionaire can't figure out how to ask a woman to spend time with him, so he resorts to elaborate schemes. Haley stared at him, this man who commanded empires, who moved through the world with such confidence, who seemed to have everything figured out, and here he was admitting that he'd been just as scared as she was, just as uncertain, just as desperate to hold on to something fragile and precious. "I thought you were out of my league," she said softly. "What?" "After the magazine. I thought, why would someone like you want someone like me? I'm nobody. A graphic designer with too many books and a studio apartment. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone." His hand tightened on hers. "I want you. I've wanted you since the moment you fell on that mat and told me you let me win. That ridiculous, beautiful lie." Haley felt tears prick her eyes. "It wasn't entirely a lie. It was absolutely a lie. I was lulling you into a false sense of security. You were flat on your back, gasping for air. Strategy." He laughed, a real laugh this time, warm and genuine. "I love that about you. Your refusal to back down, your stubbornness, your complete inability to admit defeat." "Love." The word hung between them, shimmering with possibility. "Damien," she whispered. "I'm not saying it yet." His voice was gentle but firm. "Not until you're ready to hear it. But I need you to know this isn't a game for me. It hasn't been for a long time." She wanted to tell him she was ready, that she'd been ready for weeks, maybe longer, that the only thing holding her back was her own fear, her own insecurity, her own stubborn refusal to believe that something this good could be real. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his arm wrap around her, pulling her close. They sat like that for a long time, watching the city lights existing in a moment that felt suspended outside of ordinary time. "One more week," she said finally. "One more week for what?" "For the bet. I still have one more week to take you down." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm looking forward to it. You should be worried. I'm terrified. You're mocking me." "Never." But she could hear the smile in his voice. They stayed on the terrace until the wine was gone and the night had grown cold. When he walked her to the door, he paused, his hand cradling her face with impossible tenderness. "Soon," he said, and it sounded like a promise. "Soon," she agreed, and it felt like one. She went home that night with her heart full and her mind spinning. He'd laid himself bare, confessed his fears, admitted that the confident exterior hid someone just as vulnerable as she was. And somehow that made everything clearer. She wasn't afraid of him anymore, wasn't afraid of his money, his status, the gap between their worlds. She was only afraid of losing him, and that, she realized, meant she was ready. One more week. She had one more week to figure out how to show him. The final day of the bet arrived with grey skies and the promise of rain. Haley had spent the week preparing, not just physically, though she'd practiced until her muscles ached, but mentally. She had a plan, a ridiculous, probably doomed, absolutely necessary plan. She arrived at the penthouse in the late afternoon as arranged. Training had moved there after her ankle injury, and neither of them had suggested returning to the gym. The privacy suited them. The intimacy suited them more. Damien was waiting in the living room, furniture pushed aside to create space, wearing workout clothes that clung to his frame in ways that should be illegal. "Ready for your last attempt?" he asked, that infuriating half-smile playing on his lips. "You sound confident. I am confident. You've been trying for 2 months. The odds are in my favor. Odds can change. They rarely do. She dropped her bag and faced him across the makeshift mat. He looked relaxed, amused, utterly certain of his victory. Good. She wanted him underestimating her. Standard rules, she asked. Whatever you want. No holding back. His eyebrow rose. Are you sure? I can handle it. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or anticipation. All right. No holding back. They circled each other slowly, testing, waiting. Haley had studied him for weeks, catalogued his patterns, identified his tells. He always led with his right, always shifted his weight a fraction of a second before moving, always expected her to attack first. So she didn't attack. She waited. He frowned, confused by the change in strategy. Usually she lunged, eager and impulsive. This stillness was new. Having second thoughts, he asked. Just enjoying the view. His laugh was surprised, genuine. Flirtation as distraction. Interesting tactic. Is it working? You tell me. She smiled, slow, deliberate, and watched his eyes drop to her mouth. Just for a second. Just long enough. She moved. Not the technique she'd been practicing openly, the one he'd seen 100 times. A different one. Something she'd learned from watching videos late at night, practiced in her apartment when no one was watching. A move designed for smaller opponents facing larger ones, using momentum and surprise rather than strength. She dropped low, hooked his ankle, and twisted. He went down. For a stunned moment, they both just stared. Damien flat on his back, Haley crouched beside him, breathing hard. Did you just... he started. I did. Where did you learn... YouTube. A beat of silence. Then he laughed, a full-body laugh, delighted and incredulous, and something else, something that made her heart race. YouTube, he repeated. Very educational platform. Apparently. He was still on the floor, making no move to get up, looking at her with an expression that stole her breath. You actually did it. I told you I would. You did. His hand reached out, fingers brushing her wrist. Dangerous. The word sounded different now, heavier, loaded with meaning that had nothing to do with combat. Haley's heart pounded. This was the moment, the one she'd been building toward, the one she'd been too afraid to reach for. She wasn't afraid anymore. Damien, she said softly. Yes? I'm ready. His breath caught. Ready for what? Instead of answering, she leaned down and kissed him. His response was immediate, overwhelming. One hand buried in her hair, the other wrapping around her waist, pulling her down against him. He kissed her like he'd been starving for it, months of restraint unleashed in a single devastating moment. His lips were warm, firm, demanding. He tasted like coffee, and something uniquely him, something that made her head spin and her body melt. She gasped against his mouth, and he used the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that felt like poetry. They broke apart, only to come together again, the angle changing, intensity building. His hands explored her back, her waist, tangled in her ponytail. Hers gripped his shoulders, traced the lines of his jaw, felt his heartbeat racing beneath her palm. Haley, he breathed against her lips. I've wanted... I know. She kissed him again. Me too. He rolled them smoothly, reversing their positions, his body covering hers with delicious weight. His mouth traced from her lips to her jaw, down the column of her throat, pausing at the spot that made her shiver. I've imagined this, he murmured against her skin. Every day, every night, the way you'd taste, the sounds you'd make. She made a sound then, half gasp, half moan, and felt his smile against her collarbone. That one, he said, that exact sound. Damien. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His hands cradled her face like she was precious, breakable, irreplaceable. The contrast between his strength and his gentleness made her ache. I love you, she whispered against his mouth. He went still, then pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that burned. Say it again. I love you. The words came easier the second time, true and certain. I've been falling since the day I met you. Maybe since before that. Maybe I was just waiting for you to show up. His expression cracked. joy breaking through the careful control, vulnerability shining in his eyes. "I love you too." His voice was rough, reverent. "I love your stubbornness and your books and your terrible excuses about fictional dogs. I love that you challenge me. I love that you see me, not my money. I love every single thing about you, Hayley Winslow." Tears blurred her vision. Happy tears. The kind she'd thought only existed in movies. "That's a lot of things to love," she managed. "I have a comprehensive list. Would you like to hear it? Maybe later. What would you like now?" She pulled him down, answering with a kiss that left no room for doubt. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder, drumming against the windows. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they didn't notice. They had waited long enough. The rest of the world could wait a little longer. The rain had softened to a gentle patter against the windows when they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling. Damien rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, chest heaving. "Dinner," he managed. "I made reservations. We should cancel them." His eyes opened, dark and searching. "Are you sure?" Hayley touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. She had never been more sure of anything in her life. "I don't want to go anywhere," she said softly. "I want to stay here, with you." Something shifted in his expression, hope giving way to certainty, restraint crumbling into desire. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, a promise of what was to come. "Then we stay," he murmured against her mouth. He stood, pulling her up with him, and led her through the penthouse. Not to the guest room where she'd slept before, but to his bedroom, a space she'd never entered, had barely glimpsed through half-open doors. It was surprisingly intimate. Warm wood tones, soft lighting, a massive bed with crisp white linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the rain-washed city, lights blurring like watercolors through the droplets. Damien paused at the threshold, turning to face her. His hand cradled her cheek with devastating tenderness. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said quietly. "I meant what I said. I'll wait as long as you need." Hayley's heart swelled. This man, this powerful, commanding, overwhelming man, was giving her an exit. Even now, with desire burning in his eyes, he was putting her comfort first. She loved him so much it hurt. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I've been ready. I was just scared. And now? Now I'm only scared of wasting more time." His smile was like sunrise, warm and golden and full of light. He drew her into the room, closing the door behind them, and the rest of the world fell away. He kissed her slowly, reverently, his hands sliding beneath the hem of her shirt. His fingertips traced patterns on her skin, leaving trails of fire in their wake. She shivered, and he paused. "Cold?" "No." Her voice came out breathless. "The opposite." He laughed softly, the sound vibrating through her. "Good." He lifted her shirt over her head with careful deliberation, then simply looked at her. His gaze traveled over her body with an expression that made her feel beautiful, not despite her imperfections, but including them. "You're extraordinary," he said, and it sounded like worship. "Damien, let me." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder, her collarbone, the hollow of her throat. "Let me show you." What followed was unlike anything Hayley had experienced. He undressed her slowly, treating each revealed inch of skin like a gift to be treasured. His mouth followed his hands, tasting, exploring, memorizing. He discovered the places that made her gasp, the spots that made her moan, the touches that made her forget her own name. And through it all, he watched her reactions, adjusted his movements, ensured her pleasure was the priority. It was intoxicating being the focus of such intense attention, being seen so completely. She reached for his shirt, suddenly desperate to feel his skin against hers. He helped her remove it, and she took a moment to appreciate the reality of him. The broad chest, the defined muscles, the strength contained beneath warm skin. "Your turn to stare?" he teased. "Fair's fair." She explored him with the same thoroughness he'd shown her, delighting in his sharp intake of breath when her fingers traced his abs, the groan that escaped when her lips brushed his neck. The powerful man who controlled boardrooms and built empires was trembling beneath her touch. It was heady, that power, addictive. They moved to the bed in a tangle of limbs and laughter and whispered confessions. He hovered over her, blocking out the world, His weight braced on his forearms as he looked down at her with such tenderness it made her eyes sting. "I love you," he said. "I need you to know that. This isn't just physical for me. This is everything." "I know." She pulled him down, capturing his lips. "It's everything for me, too." When they finally came together, it was with a sigh of completion, two pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. He moved slowly at first, giving her time to adjust, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. "Okay," he breathed. "Perfect." And it was. He was. They were. He found his rhythm, and she matched it, their bodies moving in an ancient dance that felt both familiar and brand new. He whispered her name like a prayer, touched her like she was precious, loved her with every fiber of his being. The pleasure built slowly, inevitably, a wave rising toward shore. She clutched his shoulders, nails digging into muscle, lost in sensation. He kissed her through it, deep, drugging kisses that stole her breath and scattered her thoughts. When she finally crested, it was with his name on her lips and his arms around her, anchoring her to earth. He followed moments later, burying his face in her neck, his body shuddering against hers. Afterward, they lay tangled together, heartbeats gradually slowing, skin cooling in the air-conditioned room. Damien pulled her close, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. "That was worth waiting for," he said. "Fishing for compliments? Seeking validation." She laughed, pressing a kiss to his chest. "It was incredible. You were incredible." "Happy?" "Deliriously." He tilted her chin up, brushing a soft kiss across her lips. "Stay tonight. Stay tomorrow. Stay forever." The words were light, but something in his voice suggested he meant them literally. "Forever is a long time," she said carefully. "Not long enough, not with you." Her heart stuttered. They'd only known each other for months. It was too soon for forever. Too fast. Too much. And yet, "Ask me again tomorrow," she whispered. "I'll ask you every day until you say yes." "That could take a while." "I'm patient." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "I've been patient this long. What's a little longer?" They made love again as the rain stopped and the clouds parted, revealing stars. Slower this time, exploring, learning each other's bodies with tender curiosity. He discovered the ticklish spot behind her knee. She found the birthmark on his hip. They laughed and sighed and whispered secrets into the darkness. When sleep finally claimed them, Haley was wrapped in his arms, her body sated, her heart full. She'd spent so long being afraid of not being enough, afraid of the gap between their worlds, afraid of falling for someone who seemed too good to be true. But lying here, listening to his heartbeat, feeling his warmth surrounding her, she realized the truth. He wasn't too good to be true. He was simply good, and he was hers. 3 months later, Haley found herself back where it all began. The Self-Defense Academy looked exactly the same. Rubber mats, punching bags, motivational posters that still hadn't managed to motivate anyone. But everything else had changed. She had changed. The nervous woman who'd walked through these doors in brand new athletic wear felt like a distant memory. In her place stood someone stronger, more confident, more certain of her place in the world. Someone who had learned that strength came in many forms, not just physical, but emotional. The courage to be vulnerable, the bravery to love. Ready for class? Damien appeared beside her, his presence as commanding as ever, his hand finding its familiar place on her lower back. Always. They trained together 3 times a week now, whenever their schedules allowed. He still corrected her form. She still complained about it. The other class members had long since accepted them as a unit. The beauty and the beast, someone had joked once, though opinions varied on who was which. Today's session was particularly intense. New techniques, complex combinations, the kind of workout that left muscles burning and minds focused. Haley threw herself into it with characteristic determination, and Damien matched her energy, pushing her to be better without ever making her feel inadequate. When the instructor called for a water break, they retreated to their usual corner. "You're getting too good," Damien said, slightly winded. "Soon you'll be teaching the class. Flattery will get you everywhere." "That's the plan," she laughed, taking a long drink from her bottle. Life with Damien had settled into a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Mornings together at his penthouse, Their penthouse now, her books having slowly invaded his shelves. Weekends with his friends, who had become her friends. A partnership built on laughter and respect, and a love that still took her breath away. It wasn't perfect. They argued about trivial things. Her habit of leaving books everywhere, his tendency to organize her belongings without asking. They had serious discussions about the future, about her career, about how to navigate the scrutiny that came with his wealth. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. The instructor announced the final exercise of the day. Partner drills, freestyle. Damien positioned himself across from her, eyes glinting with familiar challenge. One last bout? You're going to regret this. Probably. They circled each other, trading feints and blocks with practiced ease. It was almost like dancing, she thought. The give and take, the anticipation of each other's movements. They'd done this so many times that their bodies knew each other instinctively. She saw her opening and took it, attempting the takedown that had worked 3 months ago. But he was ready this time, countering smoothly, using her momentum against her. She didn't go down. Instead, she pivoted, adjusting mid-movement, and they ended up locked together, breathing hard, faces inches apart. Stalemate, he said. I'll take it. I have a better offer. Before she could respond, he stepped back and did something she'd never seen him do. He dropped to one knee. The gym fell silent. Every head turned. The instructor's whistle clattered to the floor. Damien reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. His hands, she noticed with shock, were trembling. Haley Winslow, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his fingers. I've spent my whole life being in control, planning everything, anticipating outcomes, and then you walked into this gym and threw me completely off balance. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this impossible man kneeling before her. You told me you let me win that first day, he continued, a smile tugging at his lips. But the truth is, you had me beat from the moment I saw you. Every defense I had, every wall I'd built, you brought them all down without even trying. Tears blurred her vision. She blinked them back, desperate to see him clearly. I love your stubbornness, your courage, your absolute refusal to be impressed by anything I own. I love that you challenge me, that you make me laugh, that you make me want to be better. He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the fluorescent light, elegant, understated, perfect. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve you. Someone in the class was crying, possibly multiple someones. So, Damien said, that familiar half-smile appearing. Let me win this one? Haley laughed, a watery, joyful sound that echoed through the silent gym. That's terrible. I've been working on it for weeks. It shows. Is that a yes? She looked at him, this man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had waited when she needed time, pushed when she needed motivation, held her when she needed strength, who had somehow become her home. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, because he deserved to hear it clearly. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The gym erupted. Damien slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly while their classmates cheered and the instructor dabbed at his eyes with a towel. It was chaotic and beautiful and absolutely perfect. I love you, she said against his lips. I know. He grinned. I'm very lovable. Don't ruin the moment. Never. Epilogue. 1 year later. The penthouse had been transformed. The spare room that once held miscellaneous furniture now housed a full home gym. Damien's concession to Haley's insistence that she needed to stay active even now, especially now. She stood in front of the mirror, examining her reflection. 6 months pregnant, belly round and prominent, wearing workout clothes that had been specially designed for expectant mothers. She felt enormous and awkward and more beautiful than she ever had. Your form is off, Damien said, appearing behind her. I'm doing basic stretches. Your back is curved wrong. His hand found her lower back, guiding her gently into correct alignment. His other hand rested on her belly, protective and tender. There. You're impossible. You married me anyway. She had. 6 months ago, in a ceremony that had been both intimate and joyful, surrounded by the friends who had become family. Victoria had cried. Marcus had given a speech that lasted 45 minutes. James had organized a toast that somehow ended with everyone in the pool. It had been perfect. "Our child is going to need self-defense lessons," Damien said seriously, pressing a kiss to her temple. Haley laughed. "They're not even born yet. Early preparation is key." "You're ridiculous." "You love it." She did. God help her, she really did. She turned in his arms, pulling him down for a kiss. His hands cradled her belly, thumbs tracing gentle circles over the life growing inside her. "I let you win that first day," she murmured against his lips. "I know. Dangerous." He smiled, that soft, private smile that was hers alone. "I know." Outside, the city sparkled in the morning light. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they swayed gently to music only they could hear. They had started as strangers, become partners, fallen in love. And now they were building something new, something that would last forever. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.